This is a compilation of all of the Fellowship of the Ring builds. In this compilation, there are no appearance or bonus sections. If you are interested in those sections, please see the original build videos. All of them will be linked in the description below. Starting off with the basics, I need to do a little explanation here about race. Gandalf is an immortal being called an Ainur, I might be mispronouncing that, who was created by Iluvatar, who is the god that created the elven race. Gandalf spent his early years working amongst the first elves and disguising himself as one. He has particularly keen eyesight, being able to see in the dark and see spirits of the dead. Fey ancestry makes him resistant to charm and immune to sleep, which is fitting for the lore of the character. Initially, we were going to make him a full elf due to these reasons, but without a mod, elves cannot have facial hair, and that's just a no-go for Gandalf. Therefore, we're gonna go with half-elf instead. For the sub-race, we're going to go with high half-elf. For the first cantrip we need to grab, we're going to go with the pre-selected Firebolt. Gandalf is known to have magic in the realms of fire and light. For the class, we are going to go with Wizard. Could probably see that coming. For the first three cantrips for Wizard, we are going to start with, let's just clear these out, Blade Ward, which is a form of protection, kind of like a shield, which we do see Gandalf use. Friends. Gandalf often preferred a diplomatic approach when possible. And Mage Hand. Now, there are other choices here that make more sense than Mage Hand, but they will be earned later on, and I don't want there to be too much redundancy. For the starting spells, let's just clear these out. Firstly, we'll start with Mage Armor. Feel like that's pretty self-explanatory. Shield, which is just another form of protection. Protection from good and evil, that's pretty self-explanatory as well. Featherfall is an homage to the eagles that Gandalf often calls upon in the series. Expeditious Retreat. Gandalf is surprisingly quick for a wizard that is over 2,000 years old. And then either Magic Missile for function or Thunder Wave for a more lore-friendly choice. We're going to go with Magic Missile. For the background, we're going to go for Sage, which gives you skill proficiency in Arcana and History, which is very appropriate for the build. For ability points, there's no great way to do this, unfortunately, in the beginning, because really Gandalf shouldn't have a score under 10, but we're working with the limitations here, so Strength is going to be the lowest at 8. Dexterity, we're going to bump up to 13, which, yes, I know this is uneven. We're going to fix that later on. Con is going to be 12. Intelligence is going to go up to 16. Wisdom is also going to go up to 16. And Charisma will be 10. And that's about the best we can do with the limitations we have here, I think. And then for skill proficiencies, we already know that we get Arcana and History from the background. And for the two additional ones, we're going to choose Medicine and Religion. Now, I did consider giving him Investigation, but Alright, starting at level 2 Wizard, it is time to choose our subclass. We're going to go with the one selected here, which is Abjuration. There was a bit of a debate between Abjuration and Divination, but ultimately we decided on this because of the way his magic is portrayed in the films. The Abjuration class is appropriate because it focuses on defensive spells. Speaking of spells, it's time to choose the first two here. We are going to go with Color Spray, which is a nice homage to the fireworks, and Longstrider, because Gandalf is surprisingly fast. Level 3, continuing with Wizard, it's time to choose two more spells. We're going to go with Magic Weapon, which is infusing your weapon with magical energy, which we do see happen, and Hold Person, because Gandalf displays some telekinesis-like abilities during his duel with Saruman. Level 4, it's time to choose another cantrip. We are going to go with Minor Illusion, which is another little fun homage to the fireworks. For spells, we're going to go with Tasha's Hideous Laughter, and I'll show you why. And then Misty Step, which is really a functional choice and an attempt to try to reduce redundant picks. It's also time to choose the first feat. and we're going to choose Weapon Master. And this is important because Gandalf has a unique fighting style for a wizard. He doesn't just fight with magic and his staff, he also fights with a longsword. So to gain proficiency in longswords, we need to take Weapon Master. This will also allow us to even out our dexterity score to 14. Now, it will give you proficiency in 4 weapons of your choice, so the other 3 are completely up to you. We're going to go with heavy crossbow and hand crossbow for the passive buffs, and also the short sword. Now at this point in the build, we're transitioning from Gandalf the Grey to Gandalf the White. After doing research on Gandalf's powers and abilities and looking through what the wizard class offered, as well as other spellcasting classes, we realized that he's much more in line with a light domain cleric than wizard. So although Gandalf within the world of Middle-earth functions and is recognized solely as a wizard, within the world of BG3, he would largely be considered a cleric. So at this time, we're going to multi-class into cleric. The first 3 cantrips, we're going to keep what's already selected here, which is resistance, guidance, and sacred flame, which is really all on point here. And for the subclass, again, we're going to go with light domain. This is the one that is very much in line with his powers and abilities. So light domain gives access to the light cantrip, which we actually see him use in the Mines of Moria, and the light domain spells of Burning Hands and Fairy Fire. Its subclass feature is also very pertinent, which is Warding Flare. Shield yourself with Divine Light, use your reaction to impose disadvantage on an attacker, possibly causing their attack to miss. This is very much in line with Gandalf's abilities. For the deity, there's actually a really good choice here too, which is Corellin Larethian. Now, in the world of D&D, Larethian was the creator of the Elven race, just as Iluvatar was in the world of Middle-earth. Now we're going to go to prepared spells and change this up just a little bit. We're going to keep Guiding Bolt and Shield of Faith, but we're going to take out Inflict Wounds and replace that with Command. Now, for the healing spell here, we are going to swap it out with Cure Wounds. The reason for this is that Gandalf is noted as having curing magic, but in the films, it's displayed as him having to actually touch the target to heal them. Next up at level 6, we gain access to Radiance of the Dawn. The sun's divine power dispels any magical darkness. Again, very much on point for Gandalf. All we have to do here is change up some prepared spells a bit. We are going to swap out Create or Destroy Water for Sanctuary. That's a bit more on point. Now at level 7, we unlock access to Flaming Sphere and Scorching Ray. Now granted, these aren't really things we see him doing in the films, but he does have the power of fire magic, so still on point. Again, all we have to do is swap around some prepared spells. We're going to take out Protection from Poison and use Calm Emotions instead. Now at level 8, it is time to choose a cantrip, and we are going to go with Thaumaturgy, gaining advantage on intimidation and performance checks. So think about when Gandalf needs to make himself really imposing or intimidating. Again, we're going to need to make a few changes to prepared spells, because something that BG3 likes to do is just automatically put in a spell for you when a spell slot unlocks. So we're going to take that pesky Protection from Poison out again. So we're going to swap it out for either Lesser Restoration or Bless. It's really up to you which one you choose. I think they're both kind of on point, but I'll go with Lesser Restoration. It's also time to choose the second feat, and this second feat is also important to the build, which is Dual Wielder. At this point in the build, you've only been able to use either the staff or the longsword, but Gandalf actually has a tendency to fight with both at the same time, so this is important. It also gives him a +1 to his armor class when dual wielding, so that's a nice little perk. Now at level 9, he gains access to 2 light domain spells, which would be Daylight and Fireball, and Daylight is very on theme. At level 10, he gets improved Warding Flare, and here we just need to change prepared spells again. We are just going to take out Feign Death and put in Beacon of Hope instead. At level 11, he gets 2 more domain spells, Guardian of Faith and Wall of Fire. Go to prepared spells, and we are going to swap out Spirit Guardians for Banishment. And now finally at level 12, you unlock potent spell casting, and it should be noted that the only applicable cantrip to this is Sacred Flame. You change the prepared spells to swap out Spirit Guardians for Death Ward, and then for your final feat, ability score improvement with a +2 to Wisdom to bring that up to a solid 18. Starting off with the basics, we obviously know that Aragorn is a human. He's a special type of human because he comes from the line of Númenóreans, but that doesn't exist here, so human it is. Now, this is where people are probably going to get a little perturbed, but there is a reason that I am doing this. We're starting off as fighter. We are going to be doing ranger too. We're going to be switching to it. The reason that I need to start this build as fighter rather than ranger like I wanted to originally is because if I start as ranger and swap to fighter later, he will not get heavy armor proficiency. I would have to use another method of giving him that proficiency, which is really wasteful when you can just start as fighter and then go to ranger. So that is why we're doing this here, even though it's a little less lore friendly than I would have liked. Okay, that out of the way. Fighting style, we are going to start with great weapon fighting. Now, I know some people are probably going to think, what? Great weapon fighting? But he fights with long swords, and this says that you need a two-handed weapon. I checked it out. Great weapon fighting works with versatile weapons, which means long swords as well. So put your mind at ease. Now, if you wanted to, you could do defense here too. I mean, getting a +1 to armor class while wearing armor, which he's going to be wearing the whole time, makes sense as well. I find great weapon fighting to be a little bit more appropriate here because he really doesn't miss much when he's taking a swing at something, but defense would be totally fine here as well. For background, I am going to go with Outlander. Again, this may have some contention. Some of you may be thinking, well, why not Noble? He is, after all, the heir to a throne. Yes, he is. But when you think about the life that he lives, he's really living more as an Outlander. He's known as Strider. He's known as a Ranger. So I really think Outlander is more appropriate. Also, it gives you skills in athletics and survival, which you're going to want for his build. So kind of a win-win there. Now for the ability scores, let's just clear that out there. We're going to want to focus on strength, dex, and constitution. However, I don't think any of his scores should be less than 10. He's just all around good at everything he does, so we're going to put charisma at 10, wisdom at 12, intelligence at 10, con is going to be 14, dexterity 14, and strength 16. So that's a pretty good spread. Now for skill proficiencies, as we just saw, he gets athletics and survival from the background. He's going to get 1 from race and 2 from class. So we're going to pop out the persuasion one and we're going to put that under nature. Since he has been a ranger for so long, he's very familiar with plants and animals in the wild. We're going to keep acrobatics granted from class, but the second point, instead of intimidation, we're going to put that under perception. I think this is more appropriate for the build. Again, being a ranger, he's had to be very perceptive about the environment around him just to survive. Now, fortunately for this build, I didn't have to use a hireling. Brandon was able to come in here and make a character, bring it into my game so that we don't get confused between the actual background of the character and the background of the hireling. So that'll be nice. So here we go. We've got our Aragorn here, and we are now going to swap to Ranger. Remember what I said earlier, we're just starting as fighter so that we can get that heavy armor proficiency. That's really the only reason, so we're going right back to Ranger. Now, when you start with Ranger, you got to choose a couple things. First is going to be favorite enemy. You could make arguments for a couple here, but I think the most applicable one is Keeper of the Vale. If you see how this is described here, you specialize in hunting creatures from other planes of existence, gain proficiency in Arcana, protection from good and evil. Considering the types of things that he has to keep hunting down, I'd say this is pretty appropriate. Now, some of them do not count as creatures from other planes of existence, but they definitely are otherworldly, especially the Nazgul, so I think this one is appropriate. For Natural Explorer, I really hemmed and hawed over this one for quite a while, because I feel like there's an argument for a few of them, but out of the ones available here, I ended up going with Wasteland Wanderer Poison. Out of all the various environments and conditions that he has to deal with, considering the way that the orcs and the Uruk-hai fight, they tend to have a liking for poison. So I'm assuming that over the years of wandering in the wild and dealing with just the hazards of the wild, meaning poisonous animals, poisonous plants, and then of course the poisonous weaponry that is used by the enemies like the orcs and Uruk-hai, I'm assuming that he's gained a little bit of natural resistance over time, so that's the one we're going with. And then go into skill proficiencies and change stealth to animal handling. Animal handling because, as we can see a couple times within the movies, he does have a bit of an affinity with horses. He likes to speak Elven to them. Moving on to level 3, we're still sticking with Ranger at this time. We're going to pick our 2 spells. We're going to go for functionality here. He's not a spellcaster, of course, so we're going to go with Enhanced Leap and Long Strider. Long Strider, well, I mean, do I really have to explain that to you? Enhanced Leap because, man, this guy can jump. If you remember that scene at Helm's Deep where first he has to toss Gimli over to the bridge there, and then he does the leap after it, I mean, damn, that is quite the jump. All right, and then for fighting style, we already have great weapon fighting from fighter. Now we're going to do archery for ranger. Now, granted, Aragorn is typically seen fighting with a longsword. That is his preferred weapon, but he's no slouch on a bow either. Level 4, continuing with Ranger, it is now time to choose the subclass and another spell. So for the spell, little bit of dealer's choice here because you've got a couple viable options. You could go with Goodberry because he does know about some plants that are good for healing. Again, he's a ranger, been out in the wild for a long time. He has gained information and insight about these things. Hunter's Mark is always a good option for any kind of ranger, and Aragorn definitely deals a lot of damage whenever he gets a swing in, so that's appropriate. Speak with animals, like I was saying before, the guy also likes to talk to horses, so I'm going to go with Speak with Animals on this one, but I would say any one of those is really a viable choice. For subclass, he may like horses, but I wouldn't say that he really is appropriate as a Beastmaster. We're going to go with Hunter, which unlocks Hunter's Prey. Again, there may be a little bit of argument for any of the ones here, but I think Hordebreaker is the most appropriate. I had a little bit of a debate on this one, but after thinking about it more, when it comes to the bigger creatures that they come across in the Lord of the Rings series, often Legolas is the one taking the killing blow. He's the one putting down the elephant and the cave troll. He's very nimble and quick, and he can get to those high places when he needs to. Aragorn is really better at breaking up these massive groups of enemies. I mean, again, you look at the Battle of Helm's Deep, and you look at the battle where he and Boromir are trying to fight off the Uruk-hai and Horks away from the hobbits, and he's just boom, 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 going from one enemy to the next. All right, level 5. This is going to be our last level in Ranger, and we are going to take our first feat. There are many feats that are actually really applicable to an Aragorn build, but I think the best one to start with is Alert. Having that +5 bonus to initiative makes a big difference, and as we've seen in pretty much all of the Lord of the Rings films, Aragorn is usually the first one to go running into a fight and take a swing. So I think that's appropriate. All right, now it is time to go back into Fighter. We're done with Ranger. So Fighter level 2, nothing to do here, we're just unlocking our action surge. Fighter level 3, it's time to choose the subclass, and the one that's been automatically chosen here, Battlemaster, I think is definitely the most appropriate here. By the time you get to the Battle of Helm's Deep, Aragorn is already starting to take up the mantle of being a true leader, leading others into battle, being more tactical in his attacks. So I think Battlemaster is very appropriate here. You start with 3 maneuvers. The ones that I think are best to start with are Commander's Strike. Again, he's starting to take that leader position now. He's starting to tell other people what to do in battle. Evasive Footwork. He moves pretty quickly, not as quickly as Legolas, but he does move quickly, and he's pretty good at evading attacks. And Sweeping Attack, again, this kind of goes into what I was saying about Hordebreaker. He's able to take on a lot of enemies at once. All right, now we are up to level 4 in Fighter, so it's time to get another feat. This time, we're going to do ability score improvement, and we're going to bump that strength up to 18. Since the majority of his levels are in Fighter, and that is more where the focus is of the build, having an 18 strength will definitely be helpful. For level 5 in Fighter, there's nothing for us to do here. We're just unlocking that extra attack. And I realize that it does take a while in this build setup to unlock that extra attack. So little disclaimer here, if you want to build this in a way that is more functional, you could just do all of your fighting levels first and then do your ranger levels, but that's up to you. Level 6, Fighter gets an extra feat. So it's time to choose our third feat now. And our third feat is going to be Sentinel. I think Sentinel is a really appropriate feat for the character of Aragorn. When he sees his allies getting attacked, he's going to run in there and try to help them. When an enemy within melee range attacks an ally, you use a reaction to make an attack against them, but you also get advantage on opportunity attacks. And if you get them with that opportunity attack, they can't move for the rest of their turn. So pretty handy overall. And now at level 7 Ranger and level 11 overall, it is time to choose 2 more maneuvers. This time we're going to take Fainting Attack, which is basically just putting some additional damage into your attacks by using your bonus action, and Rally. Rally, I think, because again, the way that he fights, the way that he commands, it's all about supporting those around him. He's not just someone that goes off and fights on his own. He stays with his party, he protects them, he works with them, he gives speeches to bolster their resolve. See it right in the language there, bolstering their resolve. So I think Rally is appropriate here. And now Fighter level 8, which is the final level. We get 1 more feat. Isn't that awesome? 4 feats in total. And again, I'm sure there are different thoughts on the feats that would be appropriate for this build because there are many that would work. I'm going to go with Savage Attacker here. By the time you get to level 12, you're getting towards the end of the game. And I'm kind of thinking of that in my head the same way as we're getting towards, you know, the final fight in Return of the King. And by that point, he's a pretty damn seasoned fighter, and he just does not have any fear anymore, if he ever did. He just goes in there and just massacres. By the time you get to the final fight in Return of the King, he is just ready to take these guys on and end it. So I think Savage Attacker is appropriate. For Boromir's character, we're going to do the same thing that we did with Frodo and use the Dark Urge to represent the pull of the ring's power over him. The race will of course be human, and the starting class will be fighter. For the first fighting style, we are going to start with Protection. When you have a shield, impose disadvantage on an attack against your allies when you are within 1.5 meters. This seems appropriate for the way that Boromir fights. Now, unfortunately, by choosing the dark one, our background is chosen Forest, which is the haunted one, giving us skills in medicine and intimidation. Medicine doesn't make a whole lot of sense for Boromir's character, but intimidation fits okay. Now, for the ability scores, we are going to focus on high strength and constitution to make him a tanky fighter, with above average dexterity and charisma, and really low wisdom due to his poor decision making involving the ring. So we're going to keep strength at 17 with that +2 modifier. Dexterity we're going to bring down to 11, but we will be evening out these scores later. Constitution we're going to bump up to 16 with the +1 modifier. Intelligence will stay at 10. Wisdom is coming all the way down to 8, and charisma will be 12. For skill proficiencies, we already get medicine and intimidation from the background. For the racial skill point, we are going to put that under history, due to him being educated in the history of Gondor and its rulers. And then we're going to put our expertise right under, well, where they already have them, which is athletics and acrobatics, as he was very fit and able to perform impressive feats. Something to note while we're going through the build section, Boromir's character is going to be a little bit different than how I showed the setup, because it turns out that you cannot choose Dark Urge when having another player come into your game. So the skills, proficiencies, and the background are different on this one. Hopefully that doesn't cause any confusion. Alright, at level 2, we are still in Fighter, and we're just unlocking Action Surge. At level 3 Fighter, it is time to choose a subclass. Now, since Boromir was the captain of Gondor, we are going to choose battle master, as he would have been trained in battle tactics. For the maneuvers, I feel like the most appropriate ones would be feinting attack, which is just dealing additional damage, maneuvering attack, which again is dealing additional damage, but also giving a friendly creature back half its movement speed and allowing it to move without provoking attacks of opportunity, and then riposte, which is when a hostile creature misses you with an attack, you can retaliate. At level 4 fighter, it's time to take the first feat. And the first feat is just going to be ability score improvement so that we can even out the strength and dex. And in evening out the strength to 18, we are working towards a maxed out strength stat. At level 5 fighter, we unlock that very handy extra attack. At level 6 fighter, we unlock another feat because fighters get that additional feat at level 6. This time we are going to choose Shield Master, keeping in mind that Boromir is actually the only member of the Fellowship that uses a shield. You gain a +2 bonus to dex saving throws while wielding a shield. If a spell forces you to make a dex saving throw, you can use a reaction to shield yourself and diminish the effect's damage. On a failed saving throw, you only take half damage, and on a successful saving throw, you don't take any at all, so very handy. At level 7 fighter, we get to choose 2 more maneuvers. I believe the best ones left to us would be Precision Attack, which is using one of the superior dice to add it to the attack roll, so a greater chance of accuracy. And Sweeping Attack, which allows you to attack multiple enemies at once. And at level 8 fighter, it's time to choose our third feat. We are once again going to go for ability score improvement and max out our strength at 20. Boromir's strength is often overlooked because Aragorn is, well, frankly stealing the show, but Boromir is often seen doing the same or similar feats of strength as Aragorn. Now at level 9, this is where we're going to change it up a bit, and we're actually going to multi-class into Paladin. And the reason that we're multi-classing into Paladin will be explained in the bonus section, as well as some additional ways to spice up the role-playing elements. For the subclass, which you have to choose right away, the one that fits the closest would be Oath of Devotion, which focuses on acting with honor and virtue. At level 10, you need to choose a fighting style for Paladin. We've already done protection, so this time we're going to do defense, so just give him a +1 bonus to armor class, which is appropriate because Boromir is more of a defensive fighter really than an offensive fighter. Now, by taking Paladin, we are unlocking some spells, and not everything is going to be quite on point here, but what we can do is at least swap out the prepared spells to be a little more appropriate. So we'll change to Shield of Faith, Protection from Evil and Good, and Heroism, as these are all more functional spells. And the Heroism spell is actually pretty on point to be a tribute to the most impressive and emotional fight scene in the Lord of the Rings series. At level 11 Paladin, just unlocking some things here. The only thing you need to change is going into prepared spells and getting rid of command, which they automatically put in there, and once again replacing it with protection from evil and good. And then at the final level, level 12 Paladin, it's time to choose yet another feat. So lots of feats in this build, and this time we're going to take Tough. Your hit point maximum increases by 2 for every level you've gained. I feel like that is really appropriate for Boromir, who is ridiculously resilient, taking punishment that would drop a normal man. We do need to go back into our prepared spells and once again make some changes here, getting rid of command and cure wounds and replacing them with bless and divine favor, which are really the most on-point options out of those available, which is pretty limited. First off, we're starting with Elven race, of course. Now, for the sub-race, there's a little bit of a dispute here. Most sources cite Legolas as being a Sindarin elf, and Tolkien refers to him as coming from a Sindarin line. However, it is possible that Legolas is also part Sylvan, because we don't know about his mother, and the Sindarin elves immigrated to live with the Sylvan elves. Because the Sindarin elves adopted the Sylvan elves' culture, and Legolas is not a magic user, within the realm of BG3, he would be considered a wood elf. Our starting class is going to be Ranger, but you saw that coming. Now for favorite enemy, we are going to go with Keeper of the Vale. Now, I realize that some people may be thinking, why would you not take Ranger Knight? It's appropriate because he is royalty. However, we are not taking Ranger Knight because despite it being lore friendly, it is completely useless for the build. Legolas does not use heavy armor, and he's going to get his history proficiency from the noble background, so we will go with Keeper of the Vale instead. For Natural Explorer, honestly nothing on here is very pertinent to Legolas as a character, but I believe that the closest we can get here is Wasteland Wanderer Poison because of the types of creatures that he had to fight off in Mirkwood, such as spiders and orcs that sometimes use poison on their weapons. For the background, we are going to go with Noble, which will open up proficiency in History and Persuasion. And for the ability points, I'll just point out here that you can do this a bit differently if you would like to, but realistically, Legolas should not be under 10 in any of the stats, so we are going to do it as such that he doesn't have anything too low. So we're going to have a strength of 10, Dexterity is going to stay at 17 with that +2. Con is going to go up to 16. Intelligence is going to go up to 10. Wisdom, we're going to have at 11, and I know this is uneven. You have the potential to even it out later with different items and other ways of increasing stats throughout the game. And then Charisma 10. For skill proficiencies, you'll see that you get some things automatically. You get Stealth from race and Perception from race. You automatically have Arcana, History is from background, and Persuasion is also from background. For the 3 class picks, we are going to keep Survival and Nature, but we're going to swap Animal Handling with Athletics. Like Aragorn, Legolas has a couple different fighting styles too, even though he is primarily an archer. So we're going to be multi-classing him. But firstly, we'll stay in Ranger for a bit. The first 2 spells are going to be Hunter's Mark and Longstrider, so we're just strictly going for functionality with the spells. And the fighting style is, of course, going to be Archery. Level 3, we have to choose one more spell. We're going to go with Enhanced Leap, our other functional option that is still relevant to Legolas. And then the subclass, we're going to go with Hunter. And by going with Hunter, we open up Hunter's Prey. Now, all of the Hunter's Prey options here are relevant for Legolas's character. However, we're going to go with Colossus Slayer because often Legolas is the one to get that last hit in on that really big monster. Now at level 4, I know this seems a bit early, but we're actually ready to start our multi-classing. We're going to multi-class into Rogue, and the reason for this is because of the mobility of Legolas. The rogues in BG3 are really the most mobile, so we are going to use Rogue to make him more mobile. And with the first rogue level, we're unlocking the sneak attacks. Now, granted, Legolas is not really a sneaky archer. However, you can use sneak attack damage as long as you have advantage on the enemy. In addition to unlocking the sneak attacks, we also unlock expertise in 2 skills. So we're going to change what it automatically selected. And instead, we're going to grab Athletics and Perception. At level 2 Rogue, we unlock all of the cunning actions, Hide, Dash, and Disengage. And the dash and disengage will be really important to this build. We're going to do one last level in Rogue, which will unlock the subclass. Now we're going to go with Thief, and it's not because Legolas is a thief, obviously, but it is because of the subclass features, which are Fast Hands, so gaining an additional bonus action, which for him will mean an additional attack, and then resistance to falling damage. Now at this point, we're going to multi-class one more time, this time into Fighter. And this time for fighting style, we're going to choose 2 weapon fighting. Because in addition to Legolas being an archer, he also fights with 2 long knives, or what in BG3 would probably be a short sword or a rather long dagger. Fighter level 2, you're just opening up Action Surge, so allowing another round of attacks. At level 3, it's time to choose the subclass in this as well, and we're going to go with Champion because of the subclass feature, which is the number you need to roll a critical hit while attacking is reduced by 1. The effect can stack, and there are items throughout the game that will help you stack that effect. So we're going for higher critical chance. And now at level 10, and I know this is late in the game, but we finally get access to that first feat, and we are going to go with Athlete, Reason one is because we can even out that dexterity to a healthy 18, and also because when you are prone, standing up uses significantly less movement and jump distance increases by 50%. All of it good for this build. Then at level 11, you finally unlock that extra attack. And at final level 12, because this is level 6 in Fighter, we actually get access to a second feat. And the second feat is just going to be good old ability score improvement. We're going to bring the dexterity all the way up to 20. Getting started with the basics here, we're of course going with Dwarf. Now for the sub-race, you'll see that the Shield Dwarf sounds quite flavorful for the character of Gimli. However, the sub-race feature will do us no good here because it gives armor proficiency in light and medium armor, and we're going to be getting that already from the class. So with that in mind, we're going to go with Gold Dwarf instead because the sub-race feature of your hit point maximum increasing by 1 and then again by 1 every time you gain a level is very on point for the build and will not be redundant like Shield Dwarf. Now the starting class is going to be Fighter, and this is why we don't need those armor proficiencies from the sub-race. We're going to get them from the class here. The fighting style will be great weapon fighting, as Gimli is often seen using a two-handed axe. For the background, it may seem like noble is a good choice here due to Gimli being a descendant from a line of kings, but Gimli himself is not royalty. It is the line of Dane that took the throne, not the line of Borin. And since not much is known of Gimli's history, we're going to go with Soldier because the skill proficiencies fit well, and we know he was already a good fighter when he joined the Fellowship, likely trained by members of his family. For the ability points, we're going to have a strong focus on strength and con, as Gimli was a tanky and resilient fighter. So the strength is going to be 17 with a +2 modifier. The dex will be 12. The con is going to be 16 using the +1 modifier. Intelligence will be 10. Wisdom will be 11, and Charisma will be 8. Note that with the Wisdom, you can get the Hag's Hair in Act 1 to even out this score. In addition to it evening out your Wisdom score, it's also a flavorful choice. For the Charisma being 8, we needed to tank a stat, and Charisma seemed like the most appropriate choice considering his gruff and standoffish demeanor towards others. For skill proficiencies, he already gets athletics and intimidation from his background. We're going to give him, in addition, survival, as he was no slouch when it came to surviving for extended periods of time in the wild, just a little bit slower than others. And for the other, we're going to go with history. Dwarves are very family-oriented, so history is important to them. Before we dive into the build here, I do want to note that we wanted to multi-class into Barbarian for this build, but there's a huge roadblock there. You can't rage while wearing heavy armor. Heavy armor is integral to Gimli's build, so we're going to forego Barbarian, despite the flavor it would bring to the build. And honestly, this brings up a good point that should always be considered when translating characters into BG3. You're going to run into some issues. In addition to Barbarian not working out, we also know that Gimli isn't a good jumper by his own admission, and yet in BG3, due to his high strength, he's going to be an incredible jumper. Getting started with the build at level 2, we're just unlocking Action Surge. At level 3, it's time to choose the subclass. We're going to go with Battle Master. Although we couldn't find anything in the lore about Gimli having been trained as a commander or something similar, we can tell from the way he's described in the books and the way he fights in the movies that he is a veteran fighter and has some tactical moves. For the first 3 maneuvers, we're going to go with Goading Attack, Sweeping Attack, and Trip Attack. He definitely likes to goad his enemies, make wide sweeping attacks, and sometimes even fights a bit dirty. At level 4, it's time for the first feat, and we are going to go with Tavern Brawler for 2 reasons. One is that when you make an unarmed attack, use an improvised weapon, or, here's the keyword, throw something, your strength modifier is added twice to damage and attack rolls. We know that Gimli didn't just go around with a two-handed axe batting things, but also occasionally threw hand axes around, and we want that to be part of his build. So Tavern Brawler will help with that. Also, it lets us even out the strength score to 18. Now at level 5, you unlock your extra attack. At level 6, we're going to use ability score improvement to bring that strength up to 20, which is pretty important for this build. We want to get that strength all the way up, and we will briefly discuss the Gauntlets of Hill Giant Strength in the bonus section. At level 7, it's time to choose 2 more maneuvers, so we are going to go with Disarming Attack and Menacing Attack. Although we don't see it happen, we can infer from what we do see that Gimli has disarmed and frightened enemies away before. At level 8, it's time to choose another feat, and this time we are going to go for Savage Attacker. Gimli may not be as pinpoint accurate as Legolas, but he is savage in his attacks. At level 9, nothing to do here, we're just unlocking Indomitable. At level 10, we unlock 2 more maneuvers. We are going to go with the Pushing Attack and the Fainting Attack. There are some instances where we see Gimli use brute force against enemies, either shoving them or dealing out some extra punishment. At level 11, we're just unlocking the Improved Extra Attack. And then at level 12, we get our final feat, and we're going to go with Ability Score Improvement to bring that con up to 18. First, we're going to start with the basics and the appearance. Now, call me crazy, but we are actually going to make this character the Dark Urge. Before you start getting all huffy and puffy, there is a reason for it. Although the Dark Urge may be a little more extreme than what Frodo experiences in The Lord of the Rings, the Dark Urge here is meant to be representative of the internal battle that Frodo is having throughout his journey with the ring. And it's really the only way to properly represent that in the game. Also, choosing the Dark Urge does not change anything about how you make your appearance or class. The only thing that is going to change in terms of how you create the character is that the background is chosen for you. The background is the haunted one, and the skills that come with it are medicine and intimidation. You cannot change that, but everything else is yours to change. So we'll go with the Dark Urge. The race is of course going to be Halfling. And for sub-race, we're gonna go with Lightfoot Halfling. Stronghearts are said to potentially have Dwarven blood in them, and are supposed to be really durable. And although Frodo survives quite a few things, I'd say that's more about luck than durability. So we're going to go with the Lightfoot Halfling. They're known to be stealthy and social, and I think that fits him better. As you'll see here, this is not looking like Frodo Baggins at all. This is the hireling that you can get from Withers. It's the closest you're going to get to a Frodo from him, and I want to level up all the way to 12, so this is what we're using. Also, she is a Lightfoot Halfling, so it works. The one thing that will be different, however, is some of the skill proficiencies, because this hireling has a background of Entertainer. So first we are going to start level 1 Bard. And yes, Frodo is not a spellcaster. Stay with me, please. For the cantrips, we are going to choose Blade Ward and Light. These are flavor choices. Blade Ward, which allows you to only take half damage from bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing attacks, can be a stand-in for the effect that the Mithril gives him when worn. Light, which infuses an object with an aura of light, is a stand-in for the gift Frodo receives from Galadriel, the light of the Star of Elrondil. Arendelle.
You done messed up, Aaron!
And Light, which allows you to infuse an object with an aura of light, can be a stand-in for the gift Frodo receives from Galadriel, the light of the Star Arendelle. And for the 4 spells that you have to take as a level 1 bard, we are going to try to choose the ones that are most flavorful. So we're going to go with Disguise Self, Dissonant Whispers, Long Strider, and Heroism. Disguise Self can be a stand-in for the elven cloak that Frodo receives that allows him to blend in with the surrounding. Dissonant Whispers is for flavor reasons, because although Frodo himself is not frightening any creatures, hobbits don't have a tendency to do so, the ring can often be heard whispering to him, and sometimes it seems to reach out even further than him, trying to touch other people around him, such as when it's tempting Boromir. Long Strider is really just a functional ability. Increase a creature's movement speed by 3 meters. You could say that Long Strider is appropriate whenever Frodo is being hunted by the Nazgûl. And then for Heroism, this is another flavor win here. Make yourself or a target immune to frighten and gain 5 temper hit points. And this is because hobbits are known to be very brave. Now, I couldn't find anything on Frodo that said he actually played an instrument, but I did look into what kind of instruments do hobbits play, and wind instruments tend to be preferred. So we're going with flute. And now for the ability points. We're not going to go with the standard array that Baldur's Gate gives us to start with. We are going to go for something a little bit different. So we're going to keep strength 8. That's fine. He is not a strong character. But we want to have our dexterity at 16, our constitution at 12, our intelligence at 10, our wisdom at 13, and our charisma at 16. So that's a little bit different from what it gives you initially. It gives you higher intelligence and wisdom. But I believe that if the ring were in Baldur's Gate 3, it would be attacking a wisdom score rather than an intelligence score. So we're going to boost his wisdom and bring down his intelligence a little bit to represent the resilience he has against the... And then for skill proficiencies, again, please ignore acrobatics and performance as that's from Hireling's background. But we are going to choose proficiency in stealth, history, and persuasion. Stealth should be a pretty obvious one. History is because of the time that Frodo spent with Bilbo learning about the histories of Middle-earth. And then persuasion because hobbits tend to be very charismatic characters. Now, moving on to level 2 here, we are going to switch classes to rogue. As I said before, Frodo is not a spellcaster, so we don't want to take too many levels into bard. Really, the first level into bard is just to get those flavorful choices. Level 2, nothing to be done here. You're just getting access to your cunning actions, which are very helpful. So at level 3, it's now time to choose our subclass. We're going to go with what's already chosen here, which is thief. And yes, generally, Frodo is not a thief. However, he was caught several times stealing mushrooms from Farmer Maggot. So you could make the argument that he is a little bit of a thief. And Bilbo was working as a burglar for quite some time during his adventures in The Hobbit, so maybe he picked up a thing or two. Now, right around level 4 or 5, you are probably adventuring into Grimforge, which is usually towards the end of Act 1. There is a ring there that gives you the invisibility spell, so you're going to want to keep an eye out for it so that it can stand in for the one ring. And it is called Fetish of Caladuran Smooth Hands. Now at level 4, we're going to choose our first feat. And the feat that we're going to choose first is going to be lucky. And yeah, that may seem a little bit simple, but seriously, Frodo's got some luck. Nothing to choose at level 5, it's just a class feature here. But around this level, 5 or 6, is when you're probably going to be venturing into Act 2. And shortly after entering Act 2, you should reach the Last Light Inn. There's another ring that you can get at the Last Light Inn if you're lucky in a certain fight called the Shifting Corpus Ring, and it also gives you the invisibility spell. So there's another opportunity to pick up a trinket that can fill in for the one ring. Now at level 6 road, you have the opportunity to change skills if you want to, but we don't feel the need, so we'll keep going. Level 7, still nothing to do here, just a class feature that you unlock. Now at level 8, it is time to choose your second feat. And now what we're going to go with is really a flavor choice here, but we're going to choose Resilient with an emphasis on Wisdom. Again, within the context of BG3, I imagine that the ring would be sapping your wisdom. So because of Frodo's resilience against the ring, we are going to take Resilient Wisdom, which provides you an ability increase score of 1, bringing that wisdom up to 14, meaning you're now getting a +2, and a proficiency and that ability saving throw. Level 9 is just another class unlock, so we'll go ahead to the next level. Now here's the fun thing about rogues, they get an extra feat. They get a feat at level 10. So, third feat for the character, you can be a little flexible with this one, honestly. There's a couple choices that I think would make sense. I would recommend either Alert or Mobile. Alert gives you a +5 bonus to initiative and can't be surprised. And let's face it, Frodo is not getting a whole lot of sleep later on in the series. He's pretty anxious and alert. And then Mobile is also a good choice. Movement speed increases, difficult terrain doesn't slow you down when you dash. dash, don't provoke opportunity attacks after making a melee attack. So at this point in the journey, considering the level here, which would be representative of pretty close to getting to Mount Doom, you assume that Frodo has gotten pretty good at navigating difficult terrain and running away. But we're gonna go with alert for this one. Now, this final one is really up to you. You could just take this level in Rogue and take the class feature it comes with, which is a reliable talent, but I'm gonna do something different, and this is a flavor choice, but I'm going to do the final level here in Barbarian. And you may be thinking, why the heck would you choose Barbarian for Frodo? He's got 8 strength. He's not a strong character. What are you thinking? Well, again, it's a flavor choice because just one level in Barbarian opens up Rage. And what happens towards the end of the journey when he's at Mount Doom about to cast the ring into the fire? He goes a little nutty. He finally gives in to the temptation of the ring and has a scrap with Gollum and almost dies. So I think this is a flavor win to give him just one level in Barbarian to open up Rage. Starting with the basics, we know that Sam is of course going to be a halfling. Now, for the sub-race, I would normally choose Lightfoot for the Hobbits of the Shire. However, Sam is inexplicably hardier and stronger than the rest of the Hobbits in the Fellowship, so I'm going to choose Strongheart Halfling to represent this difference. For starting class, we're going to go Bard, just like we did with Frodo. And for the starting cantrips, we're going to go with Vicious Mockery, because although Sam is generally a polite and kind hobbit, when someone threatens his friends...
Let it go! I'll have you, long shanks!
And we'll also go with Blade Ward, which is a functional choice and represents Sam's toughness. For the starting spells, we're going to go with Disguise Self, which can represent the Elven Cloak and the Ring, because if you recall, Sam does take the ring from Frodo when he believes him to be dead. Longstrider, although Sam isn't the fastest of the group, he can hustle when needed. Animal Friendship, to pay homage to Sam's love of Bill the Pony. And of course, Heroism, to represent Sam's unfaltering bravery. Now for starting instrument, I couldn't find anything specifically suggesting that Sam ever did play an instrument, but we know at Bilbo's farewell party, there were, and I quote, trumpets and horns, pipes and flutes, and other musical instruments. So we're going to go with flute, as that seems like that's a possibility. For background, I'll admit that none of them are a perfect fit. However, Folk Hero gives you animal handling and survival. Animal handling is a good fit because of Sam's affinity for ponies, and his gardening experience and therefore plant knowledge is good for survival. Now for ability scores, we are going to focus on a high strength and constitution to make him kind of a tanky halfling, plus high strength means a better carrying capacity. So for strength, we're going to put the +2 here, and we're going to bring this up to 17, which will be evened out later. Dex, we're just going to keep at 10. Sorry, Sam, you're just not that dexterous. Constitution, we're going to put the +1 here and bring this up to 16. Intelligence, sorry, we got to tank something here, so intelligence is going to be the one we tank at 8. Wisdom, we'll bring up to 10. And charisma, we will put at 13. And yes, it is uneven. There wasn't a great way to do the scores here, but there are ways to even out the charisma later on. For skill proficiencies, again, we get animal handling and survival from our background. For our 3 choices for the class, we are going to go with persuasion, due to him being good at encouraging and uplifting others, nature, due to him being a gardener, and insight, due to him being good at reading others. Starting at level 2, we are going to continue with Bard. That will unlock a level 1 spell slot, Jack of all trades, Song of Rest. For this spell slot, we are going to grab Charm Person. Now this is more appropriate for the character than the other choices available here due to his attempts to solve problems amicably, but you could go with Sleep as a funny flavor win since he can't stop telling Mr. Frodo to get some rest. At level 3, we're going to stay in Bard and get our subclass. First, we'll grab our spell, which is going to be Calm Emotions, keeping in mind that Sam would rather de-escalate than escalate a situation. For the subclass, we are going to go with College of Valor. This is appropriate for Sam as it provides combat inspiration, and Sam is the master of inspiring others. Level 4, we need to take a new cantrip. We are going to take Light, which will be representative of the Light of Elendil from Galadriel, which he uses to fight off Shelob. We also need to take a spell here, and we will take Invisibility. Now, the reason for this is, although this is not covered in the movies, while Sam had the ring with him after taking it from Frodo because he thought he had been killed, he actually wore the ring several times over the course of 2 days. And then for the first feat, we're just going to go with good old ability score improvement here. We are going to bump up that strength to 18 and the charisma to 14, therefore evening everything out. Level 5, and this is going to be our last level in Bard. We're just going to grab one more spell, which is going to be Plant Growth, which is paying homage to him being a gardener. Now at level 6, it is time to multi-class, and we're actually multi-classing into Barbarian. Now, I can see the eyebrows raising here, but let me explain the choice. Firstly, continuing with Bard doesn't make any sense here as it gets more into spell casting past level 5 and the functional and thematic choices are running thin. Also, Sam is the tankiest and toughest of the hobbits, and lastly, Sam actually has some instances of going into a type of rage. So at level 6 and level 1 Barbarian, you unlock Rage, an additional rage charge, and unarmored defense. At level 7, nothing we have to do here, just unlocking Danger Sense and Reckless Attack. And at level 3 Barbarian, it's time to choose the subclass, and there's probably going to be some eyebrows raised here as well because we're going to go with Wild Heart. Keep in mind though that Wild Magic makes absolutely no sense whatsoever for this build, and Berserker you could kind of argue for a little bit, but it's not so much that he goes into a frenzy, but rather just a rage. Also, Wild Heart gives us access to Bestial Heart, and Bear Heart is a nice flavor win here for the rough and tough Sam. While raging, you can use Unrelenting Ferocity and have resistance to all damage except psychic damage. What you do want to make sure you do though is under appearance here, check it off to none so that he doesn't get those piercings. Now at level 9 for the character, it is time to choose another feat. We are going to go with Lucky. I feel like I shouldn't have to explain this one, but Sam gets lucky in many scraps that could have proven deadly. At level 10 or 5 Barbarian, we are just unlocking some features here, which is extra attack and fast movement. At level 11 and 6 Barbarian, it is time to choose the animal aspect. And no surprise here, we are going to go with Bear. And this is very fitting. If you look at the description of this one, your carrying capacity is doubled and you have advantage on strength checks. And this definitely makes sense for Sam. And at our final level, which is level 12 or level 7 Barbarian, we just unlock the class feature of Feral Instinct. We of course know that both of them are going to be halflings, and for them, we're going to go with Lightfoot Halfling. Their starting class is going to be the Bard, and this has really become the staple for the starting class for hobbits. For their starting cantrips, we're going to go with Vicious Mockery, which is really just a fun play at their cheeky personalities. And then the other one will be Friends, due to their high charisma that makes them easy to get along with. For their starting spells, we're going to go with Longstrider. They're actually pretty quick for how short their legs are. Heroism, they have a lot of moments of surprising bravery. Disguise Self, they, like Frodo and Sam, also have elven cloaks. And then Tasha's Hideous Laughter. This is just a fun play at them being silly and making others laugh. Their starting instrument is also going to be the flute for the same reason it was chosen for Sam. For their background, I'm gonna go with Entertainer on this. I think there's a couple viable choices here, but Entertainer opens up acrobatics and performance, which I think is appropriate for them. And the way that we get to know them in The Lord of the Rings has a lot to do with them being highly charismatic, likable, and just the life of the party. For the ability points, we're going to give Merry more intelligence and wisdom as he was the more intelligent intelligent and mature of the two cousins. And for Pippin, we're going to give him more charisma as he was the more charming of the two. So the stats are going to be a little bit different between the two. I'll start with Merry and then do Pippin. So for Merry, we're going to do a 10 in strength. We're going to do a 17 in dexterity with that +2 modifier, a 13 in con, that'll get evened out later, as will the dex, a 12 in intelligence, a 10 in wisdom, and a 14 in charisma with that +1 bonus. Now, for Pippin, this will look similar but a little different. We're going to keep the 10 in strength, 17 in dex, and 13 in con, but intelligence we're going to bring all the way down to 8. Wisdom we're going to keep at 10. Charisma we're going to bump up to 16. Sorry, Pippin, but you ain't the sharpest hook in the shed. For skills, it's going to be the same for both of them. Now, they get acrobatics and performance from the background, but we have 3 to choose for their class. Sleight of hand and stealth makes sense because, well, they were thieves after all. And persuasion, because they were pretty good at getting their way. All right, now with the builds, just an FYI here that we are going to be bouncing around more than usual to try and mirror where Merry and Pippin were in terms of skills and abilities in the first part of their journey versus the middle and the end. In addition, the Merry and Pippin builds, as I mentioned earlier, are going to split off from each other, and this is representative of their split from each other in Return of the King and the different experiences they had. Okay, starting at level 2, we're going to stay in Bard for now, and the spell we're going to choose is Charm Person, which I feel is appropriate for the most charismatic lot in the Fellowship. Now at level 3, we're now going to bounce over and multi-class into Rogue. The only thing you need to do for this level of Rogue is your skills, because you're just unlocking your sneak attacks, but you get expertise in 2 skills and a proficiency in another skill, so we're going to do that quick. So we're going to put the additional skill proficiency in athletics. They were actually quite spry for hobbits. And then the expertise, we're going to actually keep it where it is in sleight of hand and stealth. I mean, they're thieves. Need I say more? Gonna stay in Rogue for now, and at the second level of Rogue, we're just unlocking those handy-dandy cunning actions. Still staying in Rogue, and this is so that we can unlock that subclass of Thief, because it's just so appropriate for these two characters, and taking the Thief subclass does unlock Fast Hands, an additional bonus action, and Second Story Work, which masters the art of falling to gain resistance to falling damage. Now that we've gotten them to the point where they've got a couple levels in Bard, and they are now officially Thieves, we're going to go back into Bard at this point for level 3, which is where you unlock the subclass. And the reason that we're waiting until level 6 to get this subclass in Bard is because it is representative of the training they do with Boromir by choosing the College of Sword. We do need to choose a spell here, so we are going to go with Featherfall. This is really just meant to be a functional choice. They're obviously not immune to falling damage, but they're actually pretty hardy and they can take a big fall and be okay. We also have to choose a fighting style, and obviously 2-weapon fighting doesn't work. Dueling does though, because they tend to fight with just a single short sword. And dueling says that if you're wielding a melee weapon that's not two-handed or versatile in one hand, no weapon in the other, you get to deal an additional 2 damage with that weapon. And if you wanted to add a shield later on, which granted isn't really appropriate to the characters, but if you just wanted to for the additional AC, then you can carry that shield in your free hand and still get the bonus. So that's nice. All right, we're going to do one more level in Bard here to ensure that this build gets 2 feats and that they only dip into their 3rd class choice just a little bit, and you'll see why. So for the cantrip, we're going to grab Blade Ward just as a nice functional cantrip. And for the spell, I'm actually going to go Enhance Ability here. Hobbits are, after all, quite remarkable. And then we get to unlock that first feat, and we're going to use Ability Score Improvement to even out the Dexterity to a lovely 18 and Con to 14. Now at this point, don't get dizzy, but we're going to bounce back into Rogue, and we get to unlock our second feat right away here. And for this, we're going to go with Good Ol' Lucky, because let's face it, all of the hobbits in the Fellowship are damn lucky. Staying in Rogue for now, and at this level we are just unlocking Uncanny Dodge, which really is appropriate for these two. One more level in Rogue here, and all we need to do is choose expertise in 2 more skills. We're just going to go with Athletics and Acrobatics here to reflect their advancement and handling themselves in combat. All right, now at level 11, we are branching off. This is going to be Merry. and then I'm going to do Pippin. So for Merry, we're going to be multi-classing into Fighter. Fighter really felt like the right choice for Merry when he decides to join Eowyn in the battle at Pelennor Field. The fighting style is just going to be defense. There's really not another choice here that quite fits. And then at final level 12, nothing to do here, we're just unlocking the action surge. Now we're going to finish off Pippin's build. And now for Pippin at level 11, we are multi-classing into Paladin. We considered making Pippin a Ranger Knight instead of Paladin, but because Boromir went into Paladin, representing his oath to Gondor, we decided to stay consistent and have Pippin dip into Paladin to also represent his oath to the Steward of Gondor. And here's a fun fact for you. Pippin's father's name was Paladin. So at level 11, we're just going to be choosing the oath, and the most appropriate oath available is Oath of Devotion. And at level 12, we are going to choose the defense fighting style, just like we did with Merry, for the same reasons. Now, we can't choose the spells that become available, but we can at least key up the prepared ones. So I'm going to go with Protection from Good and Evil, Shield of Faith, Compelled Duel, Bless, and Command. Now, besides Protection from Evil and Good, Shield of Faith, and Compelled Duel, the other choices are not very relevant. I'm going to choose Bless and Command as the other two, since they are still somewhat functional rather than based on dealing damage, but really dealer's choice at this point. All these spells are available anyway, so you can just choose the ones you want out of it. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, a comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching.